wonderful. Today I'm going to be talking about the BPM tool, maximizing efficiency and effectiveness and making the difference. And as we just mentioned, we will be tag teaming, and Corey Daughtry will be coming on momentarily. He's been working with a lot of you on the tool, so we will be talking about the tool as well. But I did want to talk about the importance of business process management, which is not only a directive from the Office of the Surgeon General, but it really includes all of us on looking and making process improvement steps. So Corey, could you move on to the first agenda slide? Thanks so much. So why is BPM so important? I'll just give a brief slide on that, then be going over the problem definition, really talking about what our providers are asking for. That's why we're all here. At the end of the day, we need to support the providers, and that's why I'll be talking about workflow improvement, because really at the focus of our work, we need to be focusing on the workflow and making sure that their providers have their workflow supported with the work that we do. Then I'll be talking about the clinical workflow analyst, just adding value in the focus area of what we do as clinical workflow analysts, sharing a success story, and definitely moving forward over to Corey's slides. So next, please. Why is BPM so important? And business process management isn't just a division or branch that you hear about. It's what all of us do in this organization. It's really delivering higher business performance outcomes. It's delivering value to our organization. Gartner has done a number of research studies, and they show that organizations that adopt business process management really add value to their organization. There's more growth, there's transformation, and they're able to really transform an organization when they adopt business process management skills. It's going in there, it's looking for waste, it's establishing changes that they can make in processes to streamline and be more efficient. And BPM, I want to highlight, is not about improving a process for its own sake. It's really going ahead and making sure that we're making major improvements in the organization. Hopefully you can all hear me. Okay, so definitely BPM is not about improving a process for its own sake. It's really going ahead and making sure that there's an organizational change. So I'll move forward to the next slide, Corey. Thanks. The way forward in this organization is basically described also by what Dr. Farzad Mashari. He's from the National Coordinator for Health IT within the Office of the National Coordinator. And what he has stated here is the EHR is a workflow engine, and that the number one challenge is having the EHR support the workflow. Usability is key component, and that the systems we develop must support the clinical workflow. So what he's saying is we can divide and develop all the EHRs we want, but at the end of the day, the systems that we push out there have to be focused on the clinical workflow. These providers who come in, who check in patients, and basically take care of that encounter. We have to make sure that these systems we develop support that. And Dr. Farzad Mashari is just one of the big leaders in the Office of the National Coordinator. As many of you know, there was $20 billion that was allocated for the American Recovery Act, and really moving forward with making sure as we adopt meaningful use and do some of the organizational changes that we are in this organization with the EHR, that we're going ahead. You want me to speak? Okay. That we are actually moving forward and making sure that our clinical workflow is supported with these new designs. So, next slide. Is your work supporting the provider workflow? And that's basically what I want you to ask yourself every day as a clinical workflow analyst, as a system trainer. Are you really going in there and making sure that the changes that you do are supporting the clinical workflow of our providers? Colonel Wheeler made the comment that the new EHR we develop has to be be designed to directly support the providers. And he sees that as a major driver. I mean, as we talk about the IEHR, as you heard about Colonel Kirkenbush's speech yesterday, a lot of these initiatives are coming down the pike. But at the end of the day, we need to look at the workflow. We need to be able to make adjustments and changes that directly support the providers that we serve. Okay, next slide. What is the provider asking for? And I love this slide. This I drafted when I was working on some of our MHS work. And as many of you know, our providers come in and submit proposals, for instance. They have ideas. And these time frames that are in here, the 1 year, the 3 years, the 2 years, are actually exact time frames of how long some of these processes take in order to get an idea that one of our docs wants, and have the end user, have that doc actually have that project delivered in hand and loaded onto the system. So it does take 7 years in the MHS spot, but what I want to emphasize in this slide is our provider many times has an idea. He comes in, he talks, he wants to make some changes, and he's asking for perhaps a car. And you know what? At the end of the day, we're not always delivering a car back to him. We make changes, you know, we get with the developer, we might talk to somebody along the way, and due to funding or something else, there's just so many constraints on the system, and he ends up getting a bike. And you know, that's really not what our providers deserve. Our providers really need to make sure that they are getting their request answered appropriately, that what they need to deliver direct patient care is supported. And we are all support staff, the CWAs, the CSTs, our branch, all of us working together. We really need to focus on making sure that if they need a car, we fight for that and get them a car, and don't deliver a tractor halfway through that they're like, hey, this isn't going to serve the purpose. So I think you all get the gist of the slide there. But really focusing on that end user, the doc. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. And the CWA supports workflow improvement. That's what I want to talk about next. Many of you know that we were funded under MAPS, under the position of Health System Specialist, to support assessment and business process reengineering, and that MAPS serves as a catalyst of transformation with the goal of maximizing efficiencies through improved clinical workflow. So, next slide. That's what I want you to take home from this message. And many times I'm asked, you know, what are the CWAs doing? And in fact, I'm going to be briefing the ISIB, which many of you heard Colonel Kirkenbush talk on Tuesday's presentation. Do louder? Okay, I'm being told repeatedly that I need to talk a little louder, so I'm doing the best I can. Okay, so the ISIB, as you remember, was the yellow box that Colonel Kirkenbush had on her slides yesterday, and that ISIB is going directly up to the JEC. And that presentation that I'm going to do on Tuesday, this slide is one of the key components in there. It's about the VA wants to know what we're doing with and how we're moving forward supporting workflow. And the VA is looking at us as a model, and they want to know about all of you. And I think that's so exciting to be able to share about our clinical workflow analyst. So all of you, I want you to pat yourself on the back for getting credit about the great work you're doing, the opportunity that we get to showcase your work, especially on the VA side, and to our other DoD counterparts. The Air Force and Navy don't have the same skill set in their MTFs, and so they're looking at us as an Army model to say, oh, is this something we can do to add value to? Many of you are just doing in fact, you all are doing a great job with adding value to the organization. And the CWA is an integral and integrated member of really the whole provider support team. And I really thank you for the work that you're doing. We're focused on process improvement experts. Many of you are. You're just going in there. How can I improve the process? How can I make changes? How can I make recommendations? You're working with your physician side by side, and really you have that diverse background that really provides a lot of value and insight to that provider as you're working with him and making process improvements. Okay, once again, you're focused on workflow assessments, you're seeking opportunities to eliminate waste, add value, and increase efficiencies. And I think that's our key take home that I definitely am going to stress next Tuesday as I brief the VA on this also. But all of you, I mean, with what you're doing is you daily go in there, you're conducting interviews and observing your making observations with your staff and providers. You're coordinating implementation plan with multiple stakeholders. You're having big meetings. I'm getting, comments about how you get everybody in the room, and many of you are doing whiteboarding sessions. Your providers have ideas that they want to change, staffing models, and you're working on that and making those recommendations. And just like you are also making recommendations for improvements in efficiency. So great job there. And one of the success stories, Corey, you can move on to the next slide. You all have success stories, and this is just one. Many of you have seen Mark Hansen's work, but this I'm also sharing with the VA on Tuesday. But this is just one example of how the CWA is going in there, making observations, making results, making improvements. So for instance, for this, the urology clinic in a workflow assessment, the clinic staff, they saw multiple data entry issues, and the clinic note was very difficult to read. And the data entry was taking 45 seconds per transaction. So what did the CWA do? The CWA went in there, they started utilizing some of the tools that they know they have available, the As You Type, the Maps tool. What kind of improvement workflow can they make? And that's like all of you. You have skills and you have tools available to you, whether you're using the mapping tool, Visual Architect, or whether you're using many of the tools in your toolbox that you've been trained to do. You are going in there and making workflow improvement. And so at the end of the day, in this just pilot example, and example that I'm sharing with you, you were able to decrease the data entry by 30 seconds per user. You were able to increase readability and overall time savings with 30 minutes per provider daily. So this is just one example of a success story, but you all have success stories out there. Every Wednesday, or once a month on those Wednesday calls, we're hearing from so many of you from the northern region, from western, just sharing examples of what you've done to make workflow improvement changes in your organization. So I want to just say great job on that. Very, 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 very good work as we're moving forward. And so one of the things that we want to talk about, just briefly before I move over to Corey's slide, is that we are going to move forward with creating some standardized workflows. And Corey, I'm going to have you move on to the next slide. Because one of the things I'm seeing is that not all the processes we are looking at are created equal. So some of our workflows that we look at are very, very structured. They're highly predictable. You go in there, it's just like a train, and that's why I've got a picture of a train up there. You know you have a start, you know exactly, it's a very, very concrete process. And we want to move forward with standardizing many of the workflows that you do. So we will be able to share them among the region and be able to share them among the MTFs in our facility. Because that way, if we've got something at Fort Knox and Fort Carson implements it, they can just pull over and look at their workflow and say, oh, I've got it, let me go ahead and move forward. And that's what we'd like to go ahead and start doing, is really moving forward with standardization. That's one of the reasons we've pushed the tool out. Colonel Wheeler's been supportive of really wanting us to be able to share a lot more information and standardize them. I feel like, we definitely need to move in this direction, and I think that really needs to be our focus for this next year, is trying to take the work that we do and share it among ourselves and say, can we make process improvement changes to this, and then get it out there and share it as as a best practice, or just share it, period. Because there really are these structured, very concrete workflow processes that we all are doing in our facility. Patient encounter, very common that you all can map out a patient encounter, and from one facility to the next, they're pretty well standard. While, your staffing model will change, the basic flow remains. And then you're also going to always have these unstructured processes, and that's what I mean by, you've got a plane up there, and many of you have taken trips, and it's a totally different. You're not on a set path. And so you're always going to be able to do these other unstructured processes out there, these unstructured workflows. But that's going to be our focus area for this next year, and I hope when we come back a year from now at this conference, we can all come back and say, wow, we were able to move forward with a number of these standardized processes, and that's going to be our focus area for this next year. So I think we've got a tool. Many of you are moving forward with adopting your tool and using it to the full capability. Many of you are working on workflows. Many of you are doing with the skills that you have and what the work that you're doing in place. Our next focus area is really going to be a lot more sharing of information. So I'll move on to the next slide. And do I have any questions? It's basically a question slide of asking you if you do have any visibility into your processes and corporate objectives. But I just basically, do we have any questions before I go ahead and adjourn and send Corey
there's a couple
take over?
Questions. This is
Anyone?
There's a couple questions that are in the chat pod there.
Okay, I'm getting a question from Yep, so we're going to start with Patricia Davidson at the bottom. Can we divide and conquer on the standardized workflows? Yes, we can. We're going to start with some of our basic clinic workflows, and we are having the capability manager. We have a chief of capability manager. We've got a number of physicians now on board who are also going to be making sure those are prioritized correctly and getting those prioritized and assigned. And yes, so what we can then do, Patricia, is divide them up among the regions if we'd like to do that, and assign each one to a region. But we'll be talking to the regional CWAs on the model that they'd like to use as well to make sure that we have support of those regional CWAs. Okay, could your office develop a medal correlating to the CWA? And this question is from also Patricia. Could your office develop a medal correlating to the CWA job description, roles, and responsibilities, or does one exist? We do have a medal list for our branch, but that's not what you're asking for. You're asking for ones that correlate to the CWA job descriptions. And yes, we are working with Benita Wilson and really looking at some of the that job description and making sure there's a better correlation. And if you've been able to attend some of her sessions and the workforce development, it's one of the objectives that we want to move forward with as well. So Patricia, great question on that. And yes, that's something that's in an immature state right now, but will be getting further maturity in the next couple months. Hopefully weeks, but I don't want to promise weeks. Okay, any other questions? Okay, and Patricia said thanks. Okay, well, I am available, and if anyone wants to go ahead and ask questions anytime, we are always open. I look forward to talking to many of you next Wednesday at our CWA call, and thank you very much for your participation in this conference. Okay, I'll turn it over to you, Corey.
Thank you, Kim. I hope everybody can hear me okay. My name is Corey Daughtry, and as Kim said, I'm going to take Act 2, as you can see from the bottom. Doesn't mean we're going to get an intermission in between. I'm not going to do the video as one of our presenters did today because I'm actually on a beach in Cozumel, so what a virtual conference, just joking. But it just goes to show you what we can do with technology today. So that plan B, if you will, is turning out to be a great thing. But I want to drill down into some of the areas that Kim presented on her slides. Some of those really dealt with the general process of business process management, and things that I'm going to touch upon are some of the life cycle issues and enablers and constraints that you may run into, and then some of the questions that you really want to ask when you engage a BPM project, and then why do projects fail, and then Lean or Six Sigma. We've had a lot of questions come up regarding Six Sigma in general terms. Should I have a lot of training in Six Sigma? Should I be a black belt to be successful? And I'm going to quickly address that. And then the quick process improvement framework, really to get that cradle to grave of what you're doing with any process improvement endeavor. And then talk about business process modeling in general, those 4 W's, and then looking at that entire process of what you're doing, and we'll cover that. And then getting into business process management notation, many of you have seen over the last several months, we've really been stressing an industry-wide process modeling technique, and we're going to show some examples on that as well. And then really getting down to the last few slides of what is the way forward. Trying to come up with standardized process maps in the future. And I'm going to show you some examples of one that was presented from the field, and that is as a catalyst that we can potentially move forward with. This is another example, similar to the slide that Kim had showed you earlier, where looking at something that the provider needs, and it started with a car concept and ending with a bicycle. And it's just another way of looking at it to make sure that things are documented properly, so that way the end user gets what they really need. And this is just, you can kind of quickly see, I think it's large enough for everyone to see some of the text below it. But you see that one example where the swing was built with 3 seats, and then you've got that one at the end where it's what the user really wanted was the old tire swing. So we want to make sure that our customers get what they really need. So it's a lot about communication, and we'll stress that over the next few slides. So BPM, what is it? We've showed many different iterations of what business process management is about, but we've kind of summed it up in a few good bullets here. It's a management discipline of focusing on your business processes, looking at that end-to-end work from beginning to end, cradle to grave, that really what creates that customer value. And that customer, who really is that customer? Is it the providers in the clinic? Is it the patient? I think in many instances it varies across what spectrum of business processes you're looking at. So you need to make sure you understand that as you move forward with who your customer is. So looking at the BPM Lifecycle, it's a management practice, just as I mentioned before, but it's characterized as a continuous lifecycle process integrating BPM activities. As you can see, that little round robin of activities with the ultimate smiley face in the end. So several variations of this will exist out there. You'll do searches and you'll have a Gartner representation. You'll find other variations of this, but it really is summarized by gradual and interactive activities that include these 6 areas, and beginning with a planning piece and refinement. You need to understand it's iterative. It's going to constantly change or potentially change based on new technologies, based on employees, based on the level of health care. So things are going to change over time. We have to be flexible in that life cycle, but to really understand that there's a beginning and there's an end, but you really need to look at it as a continual process. So as business processes move through that life cycle we just mentioned, they're enabled or constrained by a variety of factors listed here, values, beliefs, and leadership culture. And we know through our various facilities out there this holds true, and it really comes down to an understanding of what BPM is all about. So the goal of BPM, in a nutshell, is really to create a process-centric, customer-focused organization that integrates management, people, process, and technology for both operational and strategic improvement. Kind of a great way to sum that up. So questions that you can ask. I think I have about 12 questions here when you're starting BPM projects, and we'll kind of quickly go through these. But what process is at hand, and what does it achieve? You should first really get an idea of what the process is about. Asking what it achieves will help you get the reason why this process exists in the first place. It will also help you understand how critical the process is for your organization customers. Now again, we mentioned before that customer may be the patient, it may be the provider, it may be the various other clinics that they interact with. So really the process should be clearly some part of producing successful customer outcomes. So the next one, how does the process currently work? To choose what's going on in the process, you really should get some kind of idea of how the process works today. A snapshot in time, that's what we do with our as-is scenarios. The goal is not to model the process just for the sake of modeling, but to understand how those processes work. And I think we have done some level of that throughout our endeavors where we're just modeling to model. But at the end of the day, are we getting down to the crux of what we need to get down to? What is the reason the process exists? So who are the participants in the process and what are their roles? This will get you the roles and responsibilities of people involved with the process. It will also help you find performers to the various tasks. Right people should be doing the right work. I know this is not the first time you've heard that. This is why it's important to have people from all parts of the processes participating in the modeling. And we get together, we usually develop a team, we call it tiger teams, other terms are used, but you get different inputs. Now you can have too large of a team, we've heard that before. You want to get down to a key focus group that will help you get a cross-section of activities to understand what's really happening, because there may be something that's critical that's missed. So the fourth one, which business units participate in the process, who are the stakeholders, how complex will it be to design the process? Really the goal of process optimization is to get rid of useless functional silos and design the organization's hierarchy around fulfilling customers' needs. So that happens. We have many areas that work independently that don't interact with one another. That fifth one there, what will be the value of processes or the process to the customers in the future? That's important. Find out what the customer needs and how to provide that with minimal customer interaction. The key is to make it transparent so that way systems flow more easily. Processes that are not directly contributing to fulfilling customer needs should be eliminated. Tasks and processes that are not clearly contributing to a goal should either be removed or improved. So looking at that as is to be, or any structure of process improvement, going through that series of questions to get down to the value-added task, the non-value-added task, and trying to trim the fat, as they say. So where does the process start and end? You always need a beginning and end, and I think we've stressed that on some of our process modeling over the last few months. There's always a beginning and there's an end, but there's still a level of refinement that occurs. So sometimes you realize that employees do not understand where the process starts, where it ends for your customers. So they don't understand. If they don't know, they generally know their part, but they don't know what the bigger picture is. So it's making sure that everyone's involved so that they know their part, but they understand the whole purpose of the process. So the next one down is what information flows from one person to another. Ask questions why these information flows happen in the first place and whether they're really useful. The eighth one, which internal and external systems will this process interact with? Most business processes will be integrated with some other systems. Sometimes these integrations lead to very complex processes. As many of you know, we've gone down the road of PCMH, pain, behavioral health, and we're seeing some of these process models grow significantly. So in some essence, they look like they're becoming more complex. But we need to understand that the integration is a tool for providing successful customer outcomes easier, meaning that there's a better visual representation of what's happening across the entire spectrum. So are there any business rules associated with the process? Ask what business rules are out there. How often do they change? Are they still relevant? What are your reporting requirements? When you measure, remember that you get what you measure. It's crucial that your KPIs that are aligned with successful customer outcomes, otherwise you won't get the results you're looking for. What are the implementation timelines and constraints? Determine what are the timelines and constraints in the first place. Try to drill down to look at it more like a project. You know, there's a beginning and an end, and you have to meet certain milestones, but you want to know what are the things that are going to keep you from moving forward. So be sure to keep it open and realistic. Unless your implementation team has analyzed everything, do not give an estimate. Determine what constraints the organization has and figure out how the project can still be completed, because that's what's important, is having an end product. And then finally, who signs off the requirements in final production for this process? Finding out the right people is paramount to your success. Make sure the right stakeholders are on your list and spend enough time talking to them over the course of the project implementation. Getting the right folks at the table is key to success. It is very important to make sure that top management is committed to this process improvement and give their full support for the project. And many of you are out there, and I think I've stressed this before, that that communication pays you great dividends. Getting out there, communicating why you're doing something, because there's generally and I've heard this talking to many CWAs out there, there's that us and them, and there's that that mentality that we're coming in to trim the fat, and folks are getting fired. And I think that's generally what happens. But getting out there and seeing what's happening with the entire process, and really letting them know that you're there to help them. And at the end of the day, it's about providing better patient care. It's really not getting down to who should go and who should stay. It's how do we help you. So why do projects fail in the first place? Well, for one, there's a lack of understanding of what BPM is. And we've thrown the term out there, we've said what BPM stands for, but trying to drill down into the essence of what it really is, and why do we do it. So one of the key reasons why they fail is because there's just not a good understanding of what BPM is all about. We see the terms, we see a lot of different takes on it, but people want quick wins. Show me what you're going to do for me today. So if an organization is investing in BPM without understanding what it is, guess what? It's probably going to fail. There was no need for a BPM solution in the first place, and this is one that I'm going to address on a later slide, but many times it can be fixed with simple issues, simple measures like effective communication between key stakeholders within a process or the organization. Your quick wins, sometimes it's just clearly a communication barrier that can be resolved, and the process flows much more seamlessly. Lack of customer-centric business process definition. BPM projects fail also because the business processes defined are not customer-centric. We mentioned this before, but at this point, it's for you to define the customer-centric processes. You should first know who is your customer. I mentioned that we generally consider our customers always the patient. Well, they are a recipient of the process in many instances, but most of these occur within the facility between the various clinics. So how do they interact with each other as customers of that process? The return on investment blunder. At the start of the BPM projects, most organizations invest significant time and effort on a return on investment assessment. So what am I going to get at the end of the day for my efforts? Can I realize, and one of the things that I know that you've seen before, if you've had some level of Six Sigma background, you look at continuous data, things that you can get quick wins on, reducing time. Give me $1. It really show me how much you're going to save me at the end of the day. How much is this going to cost me, or do I save money? And do I minimize time? Because if you can move patients, the general idea of you move patients quicker through the process, then you could potentially accept more patients into the pipeline. So then it comes down to a level of capacity. And then lack of long-term focus. So for any organization to get real benefit of BPM, it's important to treat BPM as an organization way of thinking and functioning. So it's a mindset. So it requires that change, and that the mindset and the people, which is generally the hardest. It's continuous and consistent focus on process improvement, process governance, and process change management. So one of the things I mentioned earlier, where do most of your efforts fall? Where should most of them fall? This is a good framework to look at a lean or a Six Sigma endeavor. And really most of the workflow involves some kind of simplification, or at least that's what we hope to, is to find those workflows that can potentially be improved with simple modifications. Is it an addition of another team member? Is it adding an additional room to the equation so you can get more throughput? So workflow simplification to get rid of those non-value added activities, to get those quick win scenarios so you can move on to show your value added very quickly. This is a process improvement framework. I know you've seen many variations of this. Put this one together to kind of outline that beginning to end, if you will. So it's setting from moment one what it is that you're trying to improve, so that way there's a clear idea of what's at stake, have any good problem definition, if you will, to understand what it is that you're trying to improve. So capture those processes as they exist today, and then show a potential model with a solution in mind, whether it be a simple fix of non-value added activities eliminated, or maybe it's an IT solution. And then finally, you get down to, once you go through this cycle, there may be some level of refinement over time that you will continue to improve. So the things that I mentioned before on the, I think I started with the what, when, where, who, and finally, how is that end-to-end work performed? So analysis of the process and performance information may result in improvement activities, redesign, or re-engineering. So those 5 questions, there's a Six Sigma, really a tool, just a tool in general that you may have heard before. It's that idea generation. It's asking those 20 questions, because you start off with those 5 there, where what happens, where's it done, excuse me, where is it, when is it done, who does it, how does it done, and then it would go to the next 5 levels of, or 5 questions that you could ask. So again, going back to that what happens, then you ask that yourself the reason, why do it? And then I'm just going to kind of continue down from that what scenario, and then asking, still looking within that what scenario, a better way. Can we do something else to improve it, or is there a better way of doing it? And then that new idea is that brainstorming session of what should we do to make this better. So it's something that you may have seen before. It falls in the 20 questions of idea generation to get you to asking the right questions before you even model anything. The next thing I want to talk about is the tool in general. And we alluded to that as being the way forward and in being successful. But what we really need to make sure is that we talk about what does the tool do for us, and as an organization from the CWA community, which will grow, not so much the CWA community in general, but with the understanding, the organization's understanding of process modeling, we move into a more enterprise standard of maybe what tool we're using, that other folks outside of the community will start modeling processes as well. So we want to make sure we have a commonality. And I think I've showed these before, where we have some of the modeling syntax represented here, where we're moving from a kind of a descriptive model process, getting things more generically onto the swim lanes we've used before, but getting quickly into more of an analytic process model that allows us to get into simulation exercise. And that's where we're going to see true value added for using the tool. First it's getting some commonality and consistency with the way we model our flows, but getting down to the next step with the tool is following some of those processes where we get rid of non-value added activities, and it really allows us to see it more, because we can add different things into the equation, different things into the scenario where we've improved, or you can see what happens if it's not an improvement, and you can show an increase in or savings with actual dollars or time. So as I just said, getting down to a commonality of how we're going to use the tool in the future, and I think I've put this out in another capacity, but making sure that we all follow a general workflow, so that way as we pass these around and share, that there's a similar commonality. And I think at the bottom kind of keeps to some basic style guides, if you will, of the general style palettes, the color palettes that come with the tool, but making sure that all task, all in action, verb sequence, using a system integration and data exchange lane just kind of simplifies your flow to where you can see what's happening without a lot of the data elements. So using this and practice makes perfect, and then sharing these with other folks and being able to cross-dock the information, and it's working smarter, not harder. This is an example of an analytic workflow, and I've highlighted some things in red that that highlight the more analytical things that you'll see using that level 2 BPMN, and these give you more options. The one with the circle is a decision point, and it just gives you the ability to run that scenario with either one or multiple flows. So that's what that represents. And I think the next few slides show different elements as an analytical process. But you can see here's another example where we're using message flows back and forth from the pools and some timer events. And recently we've been working on a legend that we can add to these scenarios, and I don't have that. I will actually show that during our monthly CWA call. But this is going to tie into the template that we're going to propose at the end of the presentation. But again, this is just an example of how to take our workflows to the next level. And then, as always, the direction you need to go with this is to make sure that your end user understands how to use these diagrams or understand what the flow represents. So this is an education piece, and it comes down to communication, as I've mentioned before. So this is an example that you may or may not have tried yet. We didn't have as many opportunities with Visios to do these things, but adding a sub-process where you want to drill down, and this will be key in one of the proposed diagrams, and you'll see that in a minute, but being able to capture the high-level things of what's happening and then drill down into a particular process to get down to the real refined issues of what's happening with that particular process. So a sub-process. And this is an example of how to take that sub-process. If I expanded that, then this is an idea of what you would see. You would see a beginning and end of the actual activities that are going on within that one particular model of gather, enter data. So it puts a lot of clarity when needed, but it doesn't clutter your diagram to see the overall, trying to get to the beginning to end of what's happening. So I'm just flipping back and forth between the slides so you can see that. And then this is one of the proposed standardized workflow that one of our team members is working on for secure messaging. So it provides an example of how to develop something more in an overarching generic level that folks could take and tweak to their needs. So this is just a representative flow using the same symbology that we mentioned before with the separate lanes and pools, and then your system interaction and data exchange below to capture the nuances of this particular flow. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, we talk about what is the way forward, a potential standardized process. This was actually recommended from one of the CWAs in the field as a potential opportunity here. If you look at, and we've got it represented here in a 5-step process, and what we have here is a model that could be used as a standardized template. But taking something from arrival, reception, screening, encounter, and departure, that is what happens with every patient as they enter a facility, whether they're ambulatory or not. You can really attribute everything to one of these 5 processes. And then, as I mentioned earlier in that diagram where we had the sub-process and then being able to drill down into that next level, a potential second diagram would look like this. And as you can see up at the top, building your as-is, you've got an arrival, and then I've just added a few things here to represent a beginning and an end. But this is where you would develop that workflow that's indicative of just the arrival piece. Now, as you get into an arrival or get into an as-is or 2B, these are where you're going to see your potential improvements, because you can focus on one specific element of that workflow and find out where the clutter exists, if you will, or where that IT solution or where that improvement could fix this one particular area, so that way you have a focused effort. So arrival through departure gives you a different way to look at our workflows as they are today, but applying some standardized model as a beginning point. So I know I've said a lot today, gave you a lot of ideas. We're going to talk about this further on the CWA monthly call, where we're going to address maybe the way forward with the things I mentioned with the BPMN legend. Go back to here again, using these two, adding a potential legend, and here's a workflow as a model, and then pushing this out to the field as a potential solution. And then, as Kim mentioned earlier, agreeing what's the prioritized way of modeling our processes for everything. And it really, you kind of break everything down from a primary process, which is that end-to-end gives that most direct value to the customers, and then you have your support processes that can be attributed to maybe your ancillary support, lab and x-ray, things of that nature. And then finally you have your management processes that control all of that, and that's really where BPM gets involved in the management processes of those. But this is a starting point. This is one of the proposed ideas of how to move us forward into developing those high-level processes of what we do in healthcare. So any questions on what we've presented today, and I know we can, Kim's on as well, she can, if you had some more questions that come up based on the presentation here, we can address those as well. Yeah, I was looking out there right now. I'm trying to figure out when the first one was. I do see one from Ryan Murphy. I'll address that one first. One issue we've had with diagrams is readability by the clinic staff. They don't really like the data exchange lane and a number of other things. We're trying to design the diagrams so that they're easy to understand by a nurse and doctor. Yeah, that has been brought up before by several other folks, and really part of that problem, or part of the reason for that is, and I have to go back to that communication piece again, is to make sure that as we roll this out, there has to be a consistent way of explaining what it is that we do and what it is that the models represent. Now, we've added some more technical piece to this that was not there before. The difficulties with using Visio, as many of you know, it doesn't allow us the rapid change that we need. It doesn't allow us the ability to do certain things that a process modeling tool of what we use now can do. You're not able to move the diagram around as readily. But more than that, there are things that Visio can be done with Visio with added modules, but you don't get the level of your tool to a repository standpoint. You don't get that level of detail to be able to share and build upon. You basically have to recreate everything again, and Visio doesn't work as seamlessly. So I know it's a concern. We just need to make sure that as we move forward that we have an organized way of doing it, and really listening to, our models can be developed and tweaked, and that's why I showed that, or I didn't have the example, but I talked about it, that we provide a legend that helps explain what it is that we do, and I could quickly throw it up on the screen. This is an example of how we can do that. It's just one representative model that you could put within your summary document, if you will, that would help explain what it is that you're doing, so providing more clarity. Let's see, I think we've got, maybe we can do Camtasia and put models into video format after standardized process is determined. Yes, absolutely, we've talked about that. What's the next level of being able to push out standardized training, if you will? There's a lot that's available within the vendor's site alone, but getting down to our specific needs as we start developing healthcare workflows, we want to, in things that are specific to our needs, we want to be able to do it and be able to share that more readily, and that may be the best way to do that. So we are looking at that as a potential solution. We just have not put anything formal together for that. And I think the way forward, as we mentioned earlier, is deciding how we want to go forward with a representative model, if you will, as was presented on the slide before, and then how we're going to push that out. And do we have a summary document standard, or summary document format standardized? Now, we do have one standardized at our level. As we put summary documents together of what we do, we're assembling a PDF portfolio, if you will, of the different artifacts, i.e. the executive summary that's produced at the end of what you did, and then all the workflows that were designed, including the use cases and DOTML PF sessions, things of that nature. So we do have one of those. I think the real question is, when are we going to push something out like that? And all of these are in discussion that I think we're going to be able to focus on a little bit more with our next CWA monthly meeting. And we are going to look at more refresher training. I think that was kind of added on there as well. Really have to focus on. We've asked a series of questions out to the field on what tool has been downloaded, what tool that you're currently using, some of the difficulties that you may be having, so we can see where our focused effort needs to be before we move forward. Let's see, I think most of the other questions were along the readability and standardization, so I think we've addressed it kind of in a roundabout way, but we will address more of these on the next CWA monthly call. I believe it's 8 August, and then we'll try to answer some more questions then. Any additional questions? Kim, did you have anything else to add?
No, Corey, at this time, I just want to again stress Ryan's comment that he brought up, that these providers really are interested in looking at these workflows, nurses and docs. There's a system architect program out there that many of the architects use, and we never want to get to that level so it's so complex that nobody can read them. So definitely I feel that business process modeling notation, as long as we keep it at a simple level, most of the docs I've talked to, the nurses, have been able to read these, but you do want to watch the level of detail that you do these diagrams at, because you don't want to lose it. This is a communication tool after all for them, and so making sure that they are able to read this is key. So, thank you.
Okay, just in summary then, if we have no more questions, we covered a bunch of things today, and hopefully we've answered some of your questions, and I know that it will probably bring up additional questions that we'll hope to be able to answer in upcoming monthly sessions. So I just have to say, be patient as we move forward, and we'll get back with some of these specific answers in future weeks and months ahead. Vicki, I don't have anything else to add.
Hi, James. I have a quick... Okay, thank you so much, Corey, and I appreciate the presentation. James just asked a quick question. What about Visio Pro? We don't have Visio Pro at our level, of course, but one thing I want to make clear, that currently we are using Visual Architect. Is that the way forward 5 or 10 years from now? I have absolutely, we really need to go ahead with the requirements of what our CWAs need out there in the field as we decide on a tool. So currently we are using this. The way forward years from now, I'm not sure. James, if you are using Visio Pro, let me know if you're needing help, if that's currently what you have loaded and your CMIO wants you using it and you need help doing business process modeling notation in that. Definitely reach out to me, and I can help you offline with that. But from an enterprise standpoint right now, we are not going ahead with Visio Pro. But no idea in the future. So want to thank everyone, of course, for the great work that they're doing, and we look forward to not only talking to many of you next Wednesday, but of course giving a full-fledged follow-up on standardization in our next conference, which we'll be able to share with many of you CSTs next year at this time too. So thank you so much again.